Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the stars through the main viewport. The ship moved slowly through the edge of human space, patrolling the invisible line that separated Earth's territory from the war zone. For 43 years, two massive alien groups had been fighting each other across three arms of the galaxy. The Hegemony Alliance and the Sovereign Collective had turned peaceful worlds into battlefields and wiped out entire species in there. Endless conflict. Jake had been patrolling this border for 7 years now. He had seen refugee ships limping toward human space, their hulls scarred by alien weapons. He had watched distant explosions light up the darkness as fleets destroyed each other millions of miles away. But he had never fired a shot in anger. That was the rule. Humanity stayed out of alien wars. "Sir, we have 3 ships approaching from the neutral zone," said Lieutenant Amy Chun from her position at the communications console. "They look like civilian vessels, but they're badly damaged." Jake moved to the tactical display. The 3 ships were small, their power signatures weak. They were moving slowly, like wounded animals seeking shelter. "Any identification?" "They're broadcasting on emergency frequencies," Amy replied. "The lead ship is calling itself the Last Hope. The others aren't responding to our signals." "Bring us alongside the lead ship," Jake ordered. "But keep our shields up and weapons ready. This could be a trap." The Defiant moved closer to the damaged vessels. Through the viewport, Jake could see burn marks across their hulls. These ships had been through hell. The lead vessel was barely holding together, its engine section dark and lifeless. "Captain Morrison, this is Commander Zethka of the Calarian." "Defense Force," came a voice through the communications system. The translation software made the alien words understandable, but Jake could hear the exhaustion in the speaker's tone. "We request permission to enter human space. Our world is gone. Our people are dying." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The Calarians had been neutral like humans. Their planet was far from the main war zones, protected by treaties that both sides had respected for decades. If the Calarians were running, something terrible had happened. "Permission granted," Jake said. "We'll escort you to the nearest human station. Do you need medical assistance?" "Yes," Zethka replied. "We have wounded and sick. Many are children. The Collective attacked our world 3 days ago. They said neutrality was no longer an option." Jake's hands tightened into fists. The Sovereign Collective had broken one of the oldest laws of galactic warfare. Neutral worlds were supposed to be safe. That was the one rule both sides had always followed, until now. On Luna Station, Admiral Lisa Grant read the report from the Defiant with growing concern. The Calarian refugees had brought disturbing news. The Collective wasn't just attacking neutral worlds. They were hunting down anyone who refused to join their war effort. "How many survivors?" she asked Commander Ryan Bell, who stood beside her. Desk with a tablet full of intelligence reports. "About 15,000, Ryan replied. "Out of a population of 2 billion. The Collective didn't just attack military targets. They targeted cities, farms, schools. They wanted to send a message." Lisa stared out the window at Earth, hanging like a blue jewel in the darkness. "And what message is that?" "Join us or die," Ryan said quietly. "The refugees say the Collective is planning to force every remaining neutral species into the war. They're running out of soldiers and need fresh bodies for their meat grinder." Lisa had seen the intelligence reports. The war was consuming entire star systems. Both sides were throwing away millions of lives in battles that gained nothing. The Hegemony Alliance had started as a defensive pact between peaceful species, but 43 years of warfare had turned them into aggressive conquerors. The Sovereign Collective had begun as a trade federation, but now they saw anyone who wouldn't fight as an enemy. "What about the Hegemony?" Lisa asked. "Are they making similar moves?" "Our sources say yes," Ryan replied. "They're calling it the final recruitment. Both sides have agreed that neutrality is no longer acceptable. They want to draft every species in the galaxy into their war." Lisa felt sick. Humanity had stayed out of the galactic conflict for good reasons. They had seen what the war did to civilized species. It turned them into monsters willing to do anything for victory. Earth's leaders had decided long ago that some fights weren't worth winning if victory cost your soul, but now the monsters were coming for humanity. On Mars, Dr. Helen Parks studied tissue samples from the Calarian refugees in her laboratory. What she found made her want to scream. The aliens hadn't just been killed by energy weapons or explosives. They had been poisoned with biological agents designed to cause maximum suffering. "The collective is using terror tactics," she said to her research assistant, Dr. Kevin Liu. "They're not just killing neutrals. They're torturing them to death as an example to others." Kevin looked pale as he read the analysis. These people died in agony. The poison attacks the nervous system, causing incredible pain before death. It's designed to make people scream. Helen had studied alien biology for 20 years. She understood how different species worked, how they thought, how they felt pain. The collective's weapons were crafted with scientific precision to cause maximum psychological impact. They wanted other neutral worlds to hear about Calarian suffering and surrender without a fight. "We need to inform the Terran Council," Helen said. "This isn't just about territory or resources anymore. The collective is using genocide as a weapon of war." Lieutenant Colonel Sam Torres sat in his office at the Diplomatic Corps' headquarters, reading reports from across the galaxy. As head of alien relations, he had contacts in dozens of species. The news they brought painted a picture of a galaxy going insane. The Vorthan Republic had surrendered to the hegemony after their capital city was destroyed. The collective had forced the Mytharian Assembly to join their war effort by threatening to poison their homeworld's atmosphere. Species that had existed for millions of years were being erased from history because they refused to fight in someone else's war. "Sir, we have a priority message from the Terran Council," said his aide, Sergeant Maria Santos. "They want your assessment of the galactic situation." Sam looked at the stack of reports on his desk. Each one told the same story. The war was spreading like a disease, consuming everything in its path. Both sides had become so focused on defeating each other that they had forgotten why they started fighting in the first place. "Tell them the situation is critical," Sam said. "The war factions are preparing to force humanity into the conflict. We have maybe 6 months before they make their move." The message from Ambassador Zethka arrived while Sam was writing his report. The Calarian leader had recovered enough to send a detailed briefing about the collective's plans. The news was worse than anyone had imagined. Both the Hegemony Alliance and the Sovereign Collective were planning to end human neutrality. They had been watching Earth for years, studying human technology and military capabilities. The aliens had decided that humanity was too dangerous to remain neutral. Earth's industrial capacity and defensive technologies could tip the balance of the war in favor of whichever side controlled them. "They're going to give us an ultimatum," Zethka's message said. "Join one side or face invasion by both." They've done this to 17 neutral worlds in the past year. None of them survived. Sam forwarded the message to the Terran Council with his own analysis. Humanity was facing the same choice that had destroyed the Calarians and dozens of other peaceful species: fight in an alien war or face extinction, but humans were different from the other neutral species. They had spent centuries fighting each other before reaching the stars. They understood warfare in ways that peaceful aliens never could. And they had something the war-torn galaxy had forgotten. They remembered why peace was worth fighting for. President Maria Santos walked into the Emergency Council chamber on Luna Station, her face grim with the weight of what she was about to hear. The holographic displays around the room showed star maps marking the locations of recent battles, refugee movements, and the expanding war zones that now covered half the galaxy. Every council member looked tired, as if they had aged years in the past few weeks. Ambassador Zethka appeared as a hologram at the center of the room, his scaled features showing the strain of leading his surviving people while carrying terrible news. The Calarian had recovered from his injuries, but his eyes held the haunted look of someone who had seen his entire world burn. "The intelligence we have gathered from other refugee groups confirms our worst fears," Zethka began, his translated words carrying across the silent chamber. Both the Hegemony Alliance and the Sovereign Collective have decided to end the Age of Neutrality. They are coordinating their efforts to force every remaining neutral species into active participation in their war. General Nick Palmer, head of the Terran Defense Forces, leaned forward in his chair. How long do we have? Based on intercepted communications and refugee testimonies, we estimate 30 days, Zethka replied. They will present humanity with simultaneous ultimatums. Join one side or face invasion by both. Maria felt her stomach drop. 30 days to decide the fate of humanity and possibly the galaxy itself. She had hoped that Earth's distance from the main war zones would buy them more time, but the aliens were moving faster than anyone had expected. What about other neutral species? Asked Dr. Helen Park, attending the meeting via secure link from her Mars facility. Are they facing the same timeline? Most have already fallen, Zethka said sadly. The Arcturian Federation joined the Hegemony after their moon was destroyed. The Tau Ceti Republic surrendered to the Collective when they threatened to unleash a plague on their homeworld. Only 3 major neutral powers remain: humanity, the Centauri Trade Union, and the Vega Research Collective. And the other 2? Maria asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The Centauri Union will likely join the Hegemony. They have old trade agreements and similar government structures. The Vega Collective is already negotiating with the Sovereign Collective. They fear their research facilities will be targeted if they refuse. Maria looked around the room at her advisors and military leaders. These were the best minds humanity had to offer, but they were facing an impossible situation. Every choice led to disaster. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the massive alien fleet that had appeared at the edge of human space. 27 warships hung in the darkness, their hulls bearing the markings of the Hegemony Alliance. The lead vessel was twice the size of his ship, bristling with weapons that could reduce planets to ash. They're requesting permission to enter human space, Lieutenant Amy Chung reported from her station. The lead ship identifies itself as the Destiny of Worlds under the command of War Master Thecalon. Jake had heard of Thecalon. The alien commander had led the Hegemony's conquest of the Rigel system, turning 3 inhabited worlds into military bases. He was known for his tactical brilliance and his complete lack of mercy toward enemies. Grant them permission to approach, Jake ordered. But keep our weapons powered and ready. If they try anything, we'll make them regret it. The alien flagship moved closer, its massive bulk blocking out the stars. Jake could see weapon ports opening along its hull, a not-so-subtle reminder of the firepower aimed at his much smaller vessel. Captain Morrison, came a deep voice through the communications system. I am War Master Thecalon of the Hegemony Alliance. I bring an offer of friendship and alliance from the High Council. Jake almost laughed at the word friendship. The Hegemony's version of friendship involved forcing weaker species to fight their battles and strip mining their worlds for resources. I'm listening, Jake replied, keeping his voice neutral. Humanity has impressed us with your technological achievements and military potential, Thecalon continued. We offer you membership in the Hegemony Alliance with full rights and protections. In exchange, you will contribute your industrial capacity and military forces to our righteous war against the Collective. And if we refuse? There was a pause. Before Thecalon answered, then you will share the fate of all who stand against progress. The Collective grows stronger every day. Soon they will have the power to destroy us all. Join us now or face extinction when they come for you. Jake felt anger burning in his chest. The aliens were trying to scare humanity into joining their war by threatening them with their enemies. It was the same tactic bullies had used since the dawn of time. I'll relay your message to my superiors, Jake said. But I can tell you right now that humanity doesn't respond well to threats. You have 30 days to decide, Thecalon replied. Choose wisely, Captain Morrison. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Torres sat across from the Collective delegation in the meeting room of Haven Station. A neutral trading post that had somehow managed to avoid the war so far. The alien representatives looked nothing like the hegemony species. Where the hegemony aliens were large and aggressive-looking, the collective delegates were smaller, with pale skin and large eyes that seemed to stare right through him. Supreme. Coordinator Vexhai spoke in a soft voice that made Sam's skin crawl. The Sovereign Collective has watched humanity's development with great interest. Your species shows remarkable potential for strategic thinking and resource management. Thank you, Sam replied, though he knew this was leading somewhere he wouldn't. We offer humanity a place in our great work, Vexhai continued. Join the collective and help us bring order to the galaxy. Together we can end this destructive war and create a new age of peace and prosperity. And what would that require from us? Your military forces would be integrated into our command structure. Your industrial capacity would be directed toward collective goals. Your population would be relocated to worlds where they can be most useful. Sam felt his blood turn cold. The collective wasn't offering alliance. They were offering slavery disguised as partnership. What if we prefer to remain neutral? Sam asked, though he already knew the answer. Neutrality is a luxury the galaxy can no longer afford, Vexhai replied. The hegemony seeks to dominate all life in the galaxy. Only by joining together can we stop them. Those who refuse to help us are helping our enemies. So you're saying join you or become your enemy? I am saying that in 30 days, every species in the galaxy will have chosen their side. There will be no neutrals left to hide behind outdated treaties and false hopes of peace. Sam realized with growing horror that both alien factions were coordinating their ultimatums. They had agreed to eliminate neutrality completely, forcing every remaining species to choose sides in their war. It was the ultimate escalation of a conflict that had already consumed too much of the galaxy. Dr. Helen Park worked frantically in her laboratory, analyzing biological samples from both alien factions. What she had discovered made her question everything she thought she knew about the Galactic War. Kevin, look at these neural tissue samples, she said to her assistant. Both the hegemony and collective species show signs of long-term chemical alteration. Dr. Kevin Liu examined the data on his screen. These look like combat stimulants, but they're integrated into their basic biology. How long have they been using these? Based on the tissue degradation patterns, I'd say at least 40 years, Helen replied. Right around the time the war started. That's impossible. No species would voluntarily alter their entire population's brain chemistry. Helen felt a chill as the implications hit her. What if it wasn't voluntary? What if both sides have been using drugs to make their people more aggressive and less capable of rational thought? The evidence was overwhelming. Both alien factions showed signs of artificial enhancement of their aggressive instincts and suppression of their capacity for empathy and strategic thinking. They had been fighting for so long that they had forgotten how to think clearly about anything except war. This explains why they can't negotiate, Kevin said. They're literally addicted to conflict. And why they see neutrality as impossible, Helen added. Their altered brain chemistry makes them incapable of understanding any position except total commitment to their side. She realized that humanity's greatest advantage might be something they had never considered. The ability to think clearly while the rest of the galaxy had driven itself insane. President Maria Santos stood before the emergency session of the Terran Council, looking at the faces of representatives from every human world and colony. The weight of their decision would affect not just humanity, but possibly the entire galaxy. We have received identical ultimatums from both alien factions, she announced. Join their war effort or face invasion. They have given us 30 days to decide what are our options. Asked Counselor Robert Chun from the new Tokyo delegation. As I see it, we have 3 choices, Maria replied. We can join the Hegemony Alliance, join the Sovereign Collective, or maintain our neutrality and prepare for war. What about negotiation? Asked Counselor Lisa Wang from the Mars colonies. Both factions have made it clear that neutrality is no longer an option. They view anyone who won't fight as an enemy. The warning came too late. Captain Jake Morrison received the distress signal from New Geneva Colony while his ship was still 3 hours away from the agricultural world. The message was broken and filled with static, but the panic in the voice was unmistakable. "This is Colony Administrator Ben Clark broadcasting on all frequencies." The voice crackled through the communications system. "We are under attack by sovereign collective forces. They appeared without warning and began firing on civilian targets. We have minimal defenses. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help." Jake felt his blood turn to ice. New Geneva was home to over 2 million people, mostly farmers and their families who had settled the fertile world to grow food for the expanding human colonies. The planet had no military installations, no strategic resources, nothing that would make it a legitimate target in any war. "Maximum speed," Jake ordered his crew, "and send a priority message to command. Tell them the collective has attacked New Geneva." Lieutenant Amy Chun worked frantically at her station, trying to establish contact with the colony. "Getting multiple distress signals now, sir. The main population centers are under bombardment. The orbital defense platforms have been destroyed." Jake stared at the tactical display showing the location of New Geneva. The collective had chosen their target carefully. The colony was far from any military bases, isolated and defenseless. They weren't trying to capture strategic assets. They were sending a message written in the blood of innocent people. Ben Clark ran through the burning streets of New Geneva's capital city, carrying 5-year-old Katie Walsh in his arms. The little girl's parents had been killed when a collective bomber destroyed their apartment building. She hadn't said a word since he pulled her from the rubble, just stared at him with wide, terrified eyes all around them. The city was dying. Collective soldiers moved through the streets with cold efficiency, executing anyone they found. These weren't warriors fighting for a cause. They were exterminators removing pests. Ben had seen war before, but this was different. This was systematic. Murder designed to cause maximum terror. "The evacuation ships are loading at the spaceport," his deputy Sarah Martinez said breathlessly as she caught up with him. "But the collective is targeting the transports. They're shooting down anything that tries to leave?" Ben felt despair wash over him. The collective wasn't just attacking New Geneva. They were making sure no one escaped to tell the story. They wanted the other human colonies to hear about the massacre and surrender without a fight. "We need to get to the emergency shelters," Ben said, adjusting his grip on Katie. "Maybe we can hold out until help arrives." But even as he said it, he knew help wouldn't come in time. The nearest human warship was hours away, and the collective would be done with their butchery long before then. Supreme Coordinator Vexhai stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the destruction of New Geneva with cold satisfaction. The human colony was burning exactly as planned. Every building destroyed, every life ended, every hope crushed. It was a perfect demonstration of what happened to those who defied the collective. "Resistance is minimal," reported his tactical officer. "The humans have no significant military forces on the planet. We are proceeding with Phase 2 of the operation." Phase 2 involved the systematic execution of all surviving civilians. The collective had learned that fear was more effective than conventional weapons. One properly executed massacre could force dozens of worlds to surrender without a fight. "Make sure the communication arrays remain functional," Vexhai ordered. "I want the rest of the galaxy to hear what happens to those who refuse to join us." Battle Lord Kexmar, commanding the ground forces, understood his orders perfectly. The collective had used this tactic on 17 worlds in the past year. Kill enough civilians in sufficiently horrific ways, and even the most stubborn species would beg to join the war effort rather than face similar treatment. The collective soldiers moved through New Geneva with practiced efficiency. They had done this before on other worlds, other species. Humans were just another entry in their long list of conquered territories. Captain Morrison's ship dropped out of hyperspace to find New Geneva burning. The planet's surface was covered in smoke and fire, with debris from destroyed orbital stations falling like deadly rain. The collective fleet hung above the world like vultures, their weapons still firing into the defenseless colony. "Tactical analysis," Jake ordered, his voice tight with rage. 12 collective warships, Amy reported. They're using targeted bombardment. Weapons designed to destroy buildings while leaving the planet habitable. This isn't a military operation, sir. This is a terror attack. Jake counted the enemy ships and compared them to his single vessel. The Defiant was outnumbered 12-1, but he didn't care. American colonists were dying down there, and he was going to make the collective pay for every single life. "All weapons, prepare for combat," he ordered. "Target the nearest collective ship." "Sir, we're heavily outnumbered," his tactical officer. "Warned. Then we better make every shot count," Jake replied. "Fire." The Defiant's weapons struck the nearest collective vessel, punching through its shields and tearing into its hull. The alien ship staggered under the impact, its return fire going wide as systems failed throughout the ship. Jake's crew fought with desperate fury, knowing they were probably going to die but determined to save as many colonists as possible. The Defiant danced between the larger enemy ships, using its superior speed and maneuverability to avoid their heavier weapons. 2 enemy ships are moving to intercept the evacuation transports, Amy reported. They're trying to cut off the escape routes. "Not if I can help it," Jake muttered, turning his ship toward the intercepting vessels. "All power to weapons. Ram them if we have to." Admiral Lisa Grant watched the battle from Luna Station, her hands clenched into fists as she followed the tactical display. The Defiant was fighting alone against impossible odds, buying time for the evacuation ships to escape with their precious cargo of survivors. "How many transports got away?" she asked Commander Ryan Bell. 47 ships carrying about 40,000 people, Ryan replied. "But that's less than 2% of the colony's population." Lisa felt sick. Over 2 million people had lived on New Geneva. Now most of them were dead, killed not for any military advantage, but simply to terrify the rest of humanity into submission. "The collective is broadcasting the attack on all frequencies," Ryan continued. "They want everyone to see what they did, and they're going to get what they want," Lisa said grimly. "But not in the way they expected." The footage from New Geneva was being transmitted across human space and beyond. Images of children running from burning buildings, of families torn apart by alien weapons, of a peaceful world transformed into a nightmare. The collective had wanted to frighten humanity into surrender. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous. President Maria Santos stood in the emergency command center, watching the reports stream in from New Geneva. The numbers were staggering. Entire cities wiped out, millions dead. Families destroyed? The collective had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. "The Hegemony Alliance is offering immediate military assistance," reported General Nick Palmer. "War Master Thecalon says they're willing to provide ships and troops to help us fight the collective." "No," Maria said firmly. "We fight this war ourselves." "Ma'am, with respect, we're going to need all the help we can get," Palmer argued. "The collective has hundreds of worlds and thousands of ships. We're just one species." Maria turned to face him, her eyes blazing with cold fury. "General, the collective just murdered over 2 million innocent people to make a point. They think we'll roll over and beg for mercy like the other species they've terrorized. They're about to learn why humanity spent centuries fighting each other before we reached the stars." She walked to the communications console and opened a channel to broadcast across the galaxy. Her voice carried the weight of absolute determination as she spoke. "This is President Maria Santos of the Terran Federation. The Sovereign Collective has attacked the peaceful world of New Geneva, murdering over 2 million innocent civilians. They did this to frighten us into joining their war. They have made a serious mistake." She paused, letting her words sink in across the galaxy. "Humanity has tried to stay out of your war. We hoped that someone would remember the difference between soldiers and civilians, between legitimate targets and innocent families. You have shown us that such hopes are foolish. You wanted humanity in your war, you have it. The transmission ended, but Maria wasn't finished. She turned to her military commanders and government officials, seeing the same cold rage in their eyes that burned in her own heart. "Activate Protocol 7, she ordered. "Full military mobilization. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. The collective wants to see what happens when they make humanity angry. Let's show them." Dr. Helen Park worked frantically in her laboratory, converting her research into weapons of war. The biological agents she had studied for peaceful purposes were being modified into tools of destruction. If the collective wanted to play with terror weapons, they would learn that humanity could play that game too. "The neural inhibitors are ready," she told her assistant Kevin Liu. General Sam Torres stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, humanity's first purpose-built warship, watching the collective stronghold of Kepler 442 grow larger on the main screen. The enemy base was heavily fortified with automated defense systems and protected by a fleet of warships that had never known defeat. But Sam wasn't planning a conventional attack. "Deploy the Ghost Protocol," he ordered his tactical team. "Let's see how well their defenses work when they're fighting themselves." The human fleet had spent months developing new warfare tactics, based on their understanding of alien psychology and technology. While the collective had superior numbers and firepower, they had grown predictable after 43 years of fighting the same enemy with the same strategies. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Chun, now serving as Sam's intelligence officer, monitored the progress of their electronic warfare systems. The adaptive viruses are penetrating their network. Their automated defenses are beginning to identify each other as hostile targets. Within minutes, the collective's defensive grid began turning its weapons on itself. Missile batteries fired at their own shield generators while fighter squadrons attacked their own command centers. The aliens had built their systems to be efficient and interconnected, never imagining that someone might turn that connectivity against them. "Sir, the enemy fleet is moving to intercept," reported Commander Jake Morrison from his position aboard the Retribution. Jake had been promoted after his heroic actions at New Geneva and now served as Sam's naval tactical advisor. "Let them come," Sam replied. "Initiate Phase 2. The human ships began broadcasting on all frequencies, their transmissions carrying more than just communication signals. Dr. Helen Park's biological warfare division had developed airborne compounds that could be transmitted through standard communication arrays. The collective crews breathing the air on their ships were about to experience something they hadn't felt in decades. Clarity of thought. Captain Lisa Grant, commanding the UES Vengeance, watched her tactical display as the enemy fleet approached. The collective ships moved in perfect formation, their crews following battle plans that had been drilled into them through chemical conditioning and decades of warfare. "Ready the neutralization compounds," Lisa ordered her weapons officer. "Target their life support systems." The human weapons weren't designed to kill, they were designed to cure. When the compounds reached the collective crews, the combat stimulants that had been controlling their minds for 40 years began breaking down. For the first time since the war began, the alien soldiers could think clearly about what they were doing. Battle Lord Kexmar stood on the bridge of his flagship, preparing to destroy the human fleet when the fog in his mind suddenly lifted. Memories came flooding back of what he had been before the war, before the chemical treatments that turned his people into killing machines. He remembered his family, his children, the peaceful world he had grown up on before it was consumed by endless conflict. Around him, his crew was experiencing the same awakening. Officers who had followed orders without question for decades suddenly understood the horror of what they had become. The ship's tactical officer, a young female named Zara, began crying as she remembered the worlds they had burned and the innocents they had killed. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked his navigation officer, but the alien's voice was shaking with newfound understanding of their situation. Kexmar looked at the human ships on his display and realized that these humans had given his people something more valuable than victory. They had given them back their souls. "Stand down," he ordered quietly. "Signal the human fleet. We surrender." The surrender of Kexmar's battle group marked the beginning of a new phase in the Galactic War. Across dozens of star systems, collective forces found themselves unable to maintain their aggressive conditioning when exposed to human countermeasures. Many chose to defect rather than continue fighting a war they could finally see was pointless. President Maria Santos received the reports from the front lines with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The human strategy was working, but the cost was becoming clear. Every collective soldier who regained their sanity had to live with the memories of what they had done under chemical control. "We're establishing refugee camps on 17 liberated worlds," reported Secretary of Defense Paul Davis. "Many of the former collective troops are requesting asylum. They're terrified of what their own government will do to them if they're recaptured." "Grant it," Maria ordered. "Anyone who wants to escape this war gets our protection." Dr. Helen Park worked around the clock to develop rehabilitation treatments for the former collective soldiers. Many were suffering from severe psychological trauma as they remembered decades of actions they had taken while under chemical influence. "The neural damage is extensive," she explained to her research team. "These people have been living as chemical slaves for most of their adult lives. Teaching them how to be individuals again is going to take time, but the effort was worth it." Every collective soldier who switched sides brought intelligence about enemy positions, tactics, and weaknesses. More importantly, they served as living proof that the war could end without total destruction. The Hegemony Alliance watched the human campaign with growing alarm. War Master Thekalon had expected the humans to be valuable allies or dangerous enemies, but he hadn't expected them to fundamentally change the nature of warfare itself. "They're not trying to conquer territory," he reported to the Hegemony High Council. "They're liberating minds. Every world they touch becomes unusable to the collective because the population remembers how to think for themselves." The Hegemony leadership faced a terrible realization. If the humans could cure the collective's chemical conditioning, they could probably cure the Hegemony's conditioning as well. The alliance that had held together for 43 years was built on the same artificial aggression that drove the collective. "We need to stop them before they turn their attention to us," declared High Counselor Morex. "The humans are more dangerous than the collective ever was." But it was too late for such concerns. Human intelligence networks had been monitoring both alien factions since the war began. When the Hegemony began planning attacks on human forces, they found their communications intercepted, and their strategies countered before they could implement them. General Nick Palmer coordinated the defense of human space from his command center on Luna Station. The Terran defense grid had revealed its true capability, a network of quantum-entangled communication relays that allowed instant coordination across the entire galaxy. "Sir, we're detecting Hegemony fleet movements in the Rigel sector," reported his intelligence officer. "It looks like they're planning to attack our supply lines." "Redirect Battle Group 7 to intercept," Palmer ordered, "and inform General Torres that he now has permission to target Hegemony forces as well." The human war machine had evolved beyond anyone's expectations. What had started as a defensive action against collective aggression had become a galaxy-wide liberation campaign. Human forces moved from system to system, not to conquer but to free populations that had been enslaved by chemical conditioning and endless warfare. Commander Ryan Bell led the Psychological Operations Division, broadcasting truth across the galaxy through captured alien communication networks. His messages were simple but powerful. The war could end, the killing could stop, and there was a better way forward. "People of the galaxy," his broadcasts began, "you have been told that this war is necessary, that your enemies must be destroyed, that peace is impossible. These are lies created by those who profit from your suffering. The human species offers you a choice. Continue fighting until everyone is dead, or lay down your weapons and build a better future." The response was overwhelming. Entire planets declared independence from both warring factions. Trade routes that had been militarized for decades returned to peaceful commerce. Species that had been enemies for generations began talking to each other for the first time in living memory. Captain Morrison commanded the liberation of the Vega Research Collective, a group of scientific worlds that had been forced to develop weapons for the collective. The alien scientists greeted the human forces as heroes, sharing decades of suppressed research into peaceful technologies. "We had almost forgotten that science could be used for creation instead of destruction," said Chief Researcher Vextai, an elderly alien whose species had been enslaved by the collective for 30 years. "Your people have reminded us why we became scientists in the first place." The liberated worlds began sharing their knowledge with human researchers, creating technological advances that neither species could have achieved alone, faster than light. Communication improved dramatically. Medical treatments for dozens of species were developed, and new terraforming techniques made previously uninhabitable worlds suitable for colonization, but the most important development was the spread of hope. For the first time in over 4 decades, beings across the galaxy believed that the war could actually end without the complete destruction of one side or the other. Supreme Coordinator Vexhai watched his empire crumble from his command ship, the last mobile base of collective authority. Half his forces had defected, entire sectors had declared independence. Supreme Coordinator Vexhai stood in the command center of his fortress world, Dominion Prime, watching the countdown timer that would determine the fate of the galaxy. In 6 hours, his planet-killer weapons would fire simultaneously at Earth and every major human colony. If he couldn't rule the galaxy, he would make sure no one else could either. "Sir, we're detecting massive human fleet movements," reported his tactical officer. "They're pulling back from all offensive operations and concentrating their forces around Earth." Vexhai smiled coldly. The humans had finally realized their mistake. They had spread themselves too thin across the galaxy, trying to liberate every world they could reach. Now they would have to choose between saving their homeworld and protecting their conquered territories. "Let them run home to die," he said. "In a few hours, there won't be enough humans left to matter." But Battlelord Kexmar, now serving as an advisor to the human forces, knew something Vexhai didn't. The humans hadn't made a mistake. They had been planning for this moment since the war began. "The collective thinks they're forcing us to abandon our gains," Kexmar explained to General Sam Torres as human fleets converged on Earth. "They don't understand that every world we've liberated is now fighting on our side." Sam nodded, watching the tactical displays that showed not just human ships but vessels from dozens of species moving to defend Earth. The Arcturian Federation had broken their alliance with the hegemony. The Centauri Trade Union had declared war on the collective. Former collective worlds were sending their newly freed fleets to join the defense. "This isn't just about saving Earth anymore," Sam said. "This is about proving that the galaxy can work together for something other than destruction." President Maria Santos watched the gathering fleets from her command bunker deep beneath Washington. Ships from species that had been enemies for decades were now flying in formation, their crews working together to coordinate defenses. It was the largest peaceful gathering of military forces in galactic history. "Ma'am, we have a transmission from War Master Thekalon," reported Communications Officer David Park. "The Hegemony Alliance is officially requesting permission to join." The defense of Earth? Maria was surprised. The hegemony had been humanity's enemy just months ago. What's their reasoning? "He says that if the collective succeeds in destroying Earth, they'll use the same weapons on every world that oppose them. The Hegemony High Council has realized they're next on the target list." Maria considered the request carefully. Accepting hegemony help would mean working with aliens who had threatened to invade human space. But refusing might cost millions of lives if the planet-killer weapons succeeded. "Tell Thekalon that any hegemony forces joining the defense must submit to human command authority," she decided. "This is our fight, but we'll accept their help if they follow our rules." Dr. Helen Park worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the orbital research station, developing countermeasures for the collective's planet-killer weapons. The alien technology was based on tearing apart planetary cores using gravity manipulation, but Helen had discovered a weakness. "The weapons need to maintain a precise harmonic frequency to penetrate planetary shields," she explained to her research team. If we can disrupt that frequency, the weapons will lose their effectiveness. Her assistant, Dr. Kevin Liu, looked doubtful. The frequency changes constantly. We'd need to predict their modulation patterns in real time. That's where our alien allies come in, Helen replied. Battle Lord Kexmar used to operate these weapons. He knows their technical specifications better than anyone. Kexmar had been working with human scientists for weeks, sharing everything he knew about collective technology. The guilt over his past actions drove him to help however he could. Teaching humans how to defend against planet killers was his way of making amends for the worlds he had helped destroy. Captain Jake Morrison commanded the Defense Fleet's forward screening force, positioned between Earth and the approaching collective armada. His ship, the UES Justice, was surrounded by vessels from a dozen different species, all working together despite speaking different languages and having different cultural backgrounds. Enemy fleet detected at the edge of the solar system, reported Lieutenant Amy Chen from her sensor station. 67 ships including the planet killer platforms. Jake felt his stomach tighten. 67 ships against the nearly 200 vessels defending Earth. The odds looked good until you considered that just one of those collective ships could destroy an entire planet. Signal all ships, he ordered. Maintain formation and wait for my command. We need to buy Dr. Park enough time to deploy her countermeasures. The collective fleet moved slowly through the outer solar system, their planet-killer weapons charging for the final attack. Vexai had planned this moment for months, imagining the satisfaction of watching human worlds burn. But as his ships approached Earth, he began to notice something unexpected. Sir, we're detecting unusual energy readings from the planet, his science officer reported. It looks like they're generating some kind of harmonic interference field, Vexai frowned. The humans couldn't possibly know how his weapons worked. The planet-killer technology was a closely guarded collective secret, known only to a few higher-ranking officials. It doesn't matter, he decided. Begin the attack sequence. Destroy Earth first, then move on to the colonies. But as the planet-killer weapons powered up, their targeting systems began experiencing problems. The harmonic interference Helen Park had developed was working exactly as planned, disrupting the delicate frequency patterns the weapons needed to function. Sir, the planet killers are losing target lock, the tactical officer reported with growing panic. The harmonic disruption is too strong. Vexai realized that someone had betrayed the collective secrets to humanity. Only a handful of people knew enough about planet-killer technology to develop such precise countermeasures. Battle Lord Kexmar, he whispered, understanding flooding through him. That traitor told them everything. The collective fleet found itself facing not just human ships, but the combined forces of dozens of species that had chosen freedom over chemical slavery. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of two sides trying to destroy each other, it was a conflict between those who wanted to continue the cycle of violence and those who wanted to break free from it. Former enemies fought side by side against their former allies. Hegemony. Ships protected collective defectors while human vessels provided covering fire for alien refugees. The artificial divisions that had sustained 43 years of warfare dissolved in the face of a common desire for peace. General Sam Torres coordinated the defense from his flagship, watching as ship after ship of collective forces surrendered rather than continue fighting. The neutralization compounds were working even in space combat, allowing alien crews to think clearly about their choices for the first time in decades. Sir, Supreme Coordinator Vexai is requesting a private communication channel, reported. His communications officer Sam accepted the transmission, curious to hear what the collective leader had to say. Vexai appeared on the screen, his face showing a mixture of rage and desperation. You have destroyed everything, Vexai said. 43 years of order and progress, gone because you couldn't leave well enough alone. We ended 43 years of pointless killing, Sam replied calmly. That's not destruction, that's liberation. And what happens now? Vexai demanded. Do you plan to rule the galaxy in our place? Sam shook his head. We don't want to rule anyone. We want to help the galaxy learn how to govern itself without war. The transmission ended with Vexhi's surrender. The last collective forces laid down their weapons, their crews finally free to make their own choices about the future. Some chose to join the growing coalition of liberated worlds. Others requested transport to neutral territories where they could start new lives away from the war. President Maria Santos stood before the Galactic Assembly 6 months later, looking out at representatives from over 300 species. The Great Hall that had once hosted war councils now served as a forum for peaceful negotiation and cooperation. The Terran Accords establish a new framework for galactic civilization, she announced. No species will be forced to fight in another's war. No world will be denied the right to self-determination. And any conflict between species will be resolved through mediation rather than warfare. The Assembly voted unanimously to accept the Accords. Even former hardliners like War Master Thecalon supported the new system. Having seen how much more could be accomplished through cooperation than conquest, Dr. Helen Park opened the Galactic Medical Institute, where scientists from dozens of species work together to develop treatments for the psychological damage caused by decades of chemical conditioning. The Institute also researched ways to prevent future conflicts by promoting understanding between different forms of life. Admiral Jake Morrison took command of the Galactic Protection Service, a peaceful organization dedicated to exploration and first contact with undiscovered species. His first mission was to explore the far reaches of the galaxy, looking for civilizations that might need help avoiding the mistakes that had nearly destroyed the known galaxy.